For example 2, we're supposed to sketch the plane by finding its intercepts, then list 2 more points that also lie on the plane. So the equation that we're asked to work with is 2x plus 3y plus 6z equals 12. I'm going to go ahead and work this problem through with you just to make sure you can see how easy it will be to actually go ahead and graph it in 3D. Sometimes after we go all through the trouble to make that really pretty 3D graph for the first one, sometimes people are pretty reluctant to bother with wanting to graph 3D. Anyway, but I want to show you how easy it is. So if you need to, pause the video to copy the example directions down and then come back. But I'm just going to go ahead and get started on how to do this problem. So first, let's talk about how easy it is to draw a 3D plane on paper if you're not trying to win any awards like we kind of did in the beginning there. So you don't have to use the same perspective every time. So the first one that we drew was a common perspective. And then here's another common perspective. So positive z-axis, positive x-axis, positive y-axis. And then you could have your negative axes. Remember to always make negative axes dashed. There we go. You know, and this isn't going to win any awards. I understand that. Let's see. And x, actually, I think I need to go out a little farther on the x. Okay, so remember your tick marks should be like they should look parallel to the other axis, I guess. Just trying to kind of aid that optical illusion of 3D. Okay, and remember, if the 3D effect isn't super clear, you can always go back through and make the positive axes bold to try to make it look like it's coming out towards you. You don't want to make it too bold though, because otherwise when you try to plot points, it'll be hard to see where you put them. So there you go. Okay, so there's a much quicker 3D plane if you're just freehanding it. Okay, now let's talk about how to find intercepts. So a plane should have 3 intercepts as far as like x, y, or z intercepts. So let's think about the x-intercept, for example. When do x-intercepts happen? In 3D space, if you're on the x-axis, then that means that your your y-coordinate and your z-coordinates would both be 0. So if you're finding an x-intercept in 3D space, you would simply be putting 0 in for the y and the z terms. So if you're going to show all the steps, which most people don't, but this is what it would look like if you're kind of being very careful to explain how you're finding x-intercepts. So simplify this equation, and you're just looking for when 2x equals 12, which means you'd get x equals 6. Now, what would the coordinates be of this point that we just found? Well, the x-coordinate is 6, and the y-coordinate and the z-coordinates would both be 0. There we go. And then you know me, I'm always going to ask you to label the coordinates of the intercepts on the picture, so you might as well just do it. All right, now let's find the y-intercept. So when do y-intercepts happen? Well, if you're on the y-axis, then your other 2 coordinates would be 0. So your x and your z coordinates would be 0. So if you go back to the original equation and put 0 in for x and z, then you would look like this. And that would simplify to simply say 3y equals 12. And so we ended up with a y-coordinate of 4. So what would the coordinates be? Well, you put 0 in for x, you got 4 out for y, and you would put 0 in for z. Oh my goodness. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the y-axis. Okay, now let's find the z-intercept. Okay, z-intercepts will happen when your other 2 coordinates are 0. So it looked like 2 times 0 plus 3 times 0 plus 6z equals 12, which of course simplifies to be 6z equals 12, which means we got z equals 2. Right? Order triple, it would be 0, 0, 2. Okay, now, how do you use those 3 points to draw a plane? Well, it really only takes 3 non-collinear points to determine a plane. So if you just connect the dots, and then you could just kind of shade it in, so you could see kind of almost as if 3, you have a sheet of, fabric or something pinned down in 3 different spots, and then someone pulled it tight. Now, a plane goes forever in all directions. Back in geometry, we had a tendency to always draw parallelograms to represent planes, but planes don't technically have shape. When we draw them, since they're infinite, we really just draw like a small part of the plane, and then your imagination is supposed to kind of like follow that in all directions for like the rest of it. So anyway, so this little triangular region is a part of the plane. So hopefully that makes sense. Now the directions say list 2 more points that also lie on the plane. There are infinitely many points that lie on the plane, so there are many correct answers here. So really what you can do is you can just take 2x plus 3y plus 6z equals 12 and just kind of like pick, randomly pick some numbers. So like, let's say I want like x to be 1 and then y to be 2. What would this equation then say? It would say 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 6z equals 12. And then you could figure out what z would have to be to make this work out. So 2 plus 6 is 8. Subtract it over, you'd get 6z would equal 4. Yes. And then z would end up needing to be 2/3. So one of the infinitely many points that lie on that plane would be 1, 2, 2/3. There we go. And then if you need another point that lies on the line, because the directions say to find 2 more, then, you could just make up more numbers, right? So like, what if x is 5, and y is 0? So 2 times 5 is 10, plus 3 times 0 is 0, plus 6z would equal 12. And then so that means 6z would have to equal 2, and then z would have to be 1/3. And so another point, that would be, so there are infinitely many correct answers to that last part. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right, my friends, we have 2 more examples that I do want to make sure we go through. So I'm just going to give them both to you. Do what you can with them, and then we'll go over them together in the last video. So example 3 is just write a system of equations that has the given solution, -5, -2, 1. You basically learn how math teachers make your math problems on your tests by once you do that. And then example 4, write an equation of the parabola of the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c that passes through the points 1, 3, 2, 2, and 3, -3. Best of luck.